Now today's task is to change the engine thermostat. The reason I'm doing that is because the engine is no longer reaching its operating temperature of 90 degrees. So it's hanging around the 75-80 degrees mark all the time, just never actually reaching temperature. So that's not good for the engine. So I'll be doing that very shortly. So with this little task, I've got to change the engine thermostat. It looks worse than what it is to actually get at. This is my radiator pipe, and then there's the plastic pipe there, and it's actually down inside that piece at the back there. So that's just like two 10mm bolts that hold it in. So the things that I've got to take off is, to give me better access, I'll take off this pipe. So there'll be a clip underneath and a clip on the top there, and there's two bolts there. There's one there and then another one there. Release that sensor, and that little ball down there, there's a little tiny bolt that holds that on. So I'll loosen the bolt, loosen those off, go underneath, take the under tray off. Hopefully that pipe will come out the way, give me better access to down there. Take the water pipe off, take the plastic pipe off where the thermostat is, and then clean it up, change the thermostat, put it all back together and put new coolant in it. That's the plan anyway. Alright, so the water temperature now in this pan is 85 degrees, 86. So that thermostat is about to open, because in theory it's supposed to open at 87 degrees. So see what happens. And if you look quite closely, you can see that in there, that bit just there, that's now opening up. And the top piece of the thermostat, that brass piece, has now gone down inside. So that's indicating that the thermostat is actually opening and doing what it's supposed to do. So I'm just checking the new one out, making sure it's actually opening and shutting as it's supposed to. You can see there that that brass bit's gone quite a way down inside now, because inside that little brass bit, inside the brass bit down in there, is basically a wax capsule, and as it gets hot the wax expands in there and then makes the thing operate, and then when it cools down again it shuts the valve. That's a wax operated valve, and that is in near enough every vehicle out there, whether it be petrol, diesel, whichever. Well, it's got a internal combustion engine, it's got a thermostat in it. So you can see now that gap's quite big in there. So now you can see it's slowly closing again. I've got rid of the water, the thing's cooling down, the gap's no longer there, and it's now closing back up, and that will close back up again. So when the engine's cold, that valve opening remains shut. So you've got cold water going around the engine. The engine then sends the water around your heater that heats up the inside of the vehicle, and then when the engine temperature in the vehicle and the vehicle's engine gets up to whatever the thermostat temperature is supposed to be, as in this one's supposed to operate at 87 degrees, that will then open up, let the water out the engine through to your front radiator, and then cool that water, go back to the engine again. That will then send cool water back to the thermostat part, this, and then shut the valve again, keeps the water inside the engine, and it does that repeatedly all the time when you're driving down the road. So that's how the thermostat works, and the reason I've got to change it on mine is basically because that part I reckon is stuck open. So I'm going to change it and then test the old one when I've got it out. I'm just checking to see what temperature this thermostat's operating at, and if it's actually operating in the first place, because now I've done the job, it was actually stuck. It's very minutely open in comparison to the new one. if you have a look at the picture that I've put in there with the two side by side and look at the brass bit at the top, you'll see that this old one is very slightly lower than the new one, which is indicating that this old one is very slightly open. So yeah, so this does open. It does open. You can see the brass bit, see how far down it is. So yes, it does open up the hole, so you can probably see just inside there a gap. Yeah, you can see a gap inside there, so that's actually opened it up. And I would bet that when I turn this back off and cool it back down again, that it won't go back to the top position where the new one is. So now I've tipped the water away. You can sort of see there's a gap down the back there. See, I can wiggle that behind. There's a very small gap. That gap is now closing up. So it's a matter now of waiting and run some cold water over it to see if that brass piece is actually returning to the top or not. So where it was, where the new one was. So I'll be back in a second when I've put some cold water in there. Right, so now I've cooled it down with cold water, so that is really cold. You look across the top there, can't see the brass bit, that little brass bit in the top there, just there, can't see that, so that has not actually returned to shut the valve that's in there. The little plate that's just above that spring, that is the bit that actually moves and opens and shuts to let the water through the middle, and it's not fully returning, so it's a little bit like a leaking plug in a sink. It's always been letting water through from the engine to the radiator, therefore the car's never been reaching temperature. So that's why I've changed it. Well, that was an interesting experience. This pipe that I was going to, figured I'd just take it off and take it out the way of getting into down behind there. Yeah, that's not so easy. I didn't end up taking it out. I just disconnected that, removed the ball, removed that clip to pull this forward to actually remove that ball, get to it, and then it's the bolt that's right down the bottom that's an absolute pig to get to. Got it all back together now and bleeding the system. That is a challenge, to say the very least. What I actually did though, I did it yesterday, left it overnight, refilled with coolant because the heater wasn't getting hot and I couldn't bleed it out, so I left it overnight. And then what I did, I pulled this pipe off without this cap on and actually draped it over the top and squeeze in that pipe there every now and again to actually get some air out of it. Some air bubbles did come out. It's been taking a little while longer than anticipated, so if you do one of these, be prepared for at least a couple of hours. So anyway, yeah, I'll post a couple of pictures of the new thermostat and the old thermostat so you can see the difference. Well, I would call that a successful outcome. Replaced the thermostat. It was about £7.50 part, and I'm now running at proper 90-degree temperature. Just been for a little run, all seems well.